Weekend in Bangkok with two Olympic gymnasts is the first episode of the third season of 2.5 Men. This is directed by Halvorson, and as always there will be spoilers from now as I talk about the episode. I don't actually have that many notes, but I did thoroughly enjoy this one. I do think it's a really solid start to the third season, and I will go through things chronologically. I didn't write down too many quotes. I think I wrote down one. But in general, I really liked it. I have no complaints. It starts off with Alan on the phone. Evelyn is apparently trying to set him up on a blind date. They then realise, Alan and Charlie, that something's wrong with the television. So Charlie says he'll call a guy out. And Alan says, no, I will fix it. And they get a ladder. And Alan goes up on the roof. And Alan falls off. That's not the funny thing. I'm not laughing because Alan fell off the roof. But it's the moment where he steps down and you just know that that ladder is going backwards. And my heart kind of dropped even though I know it was going to happen. It's very dramatic. And Alan is seriously hurt. He's in a neck brace. His arms are all bandaged up or they're in casts. Clearly he just can't do anything at the moment. So initially he was going to tell Judith she couldn't take Jake over that weekend because he can't really look after him. But Charlie, quite sweetly, said he wants Jake to come over, which I thought was really nice. And Judith drops Jake off. And I think immediately we are being informed of the fact that Jake is a little bit older. There are a couple of occasions in this episode where this is really reinforced. And the opening scene for Jake, when Judith is at the door, definitely highlights this because he's being really cheeky and mouthing off to Judith a lot more than he's ever done before. Normally he has just one or two comebacks or cheeky lines, but this was rudeness after rudeness after rudeness. He's getting towards that teenager phase, and I think that was a really strong way of saying he is a little bit older now. Maybe we can expect some different things from him, and I'll get into that a little bit later. Charlie decides to take Jake out for dinner, and Jake wants to go to Clucky's, so they go to Clucky's. We're not there too long, but I rather liked the restaurant scene. I thought it worked very well. Jake was being fussy, and Charlie ended up shouting at him, and it went silent. And that silence was so powerful. And we then briefly cut back to Alan, and I like the fact that we cut back to Alan every now and then. I think the rate at which it does that is really effective. It's not so frequent that we kind of get bored of going back and forth, but it's frequent enough that it doesn't feel very random. So I think they got the balance there pretty perfectly. Alan is on the sofa, basically unable to move, but he needs to pee. So he gets up, and before we know it, his trousers are around his ankles, and Evelyn is coming in the door with the woman she wanted to set Alan up with. This is a small thing, but I love the colours of the costumes for Evelyn and Alan's apparent blind date. One is in this beautiful hot pink, one is in a kind of, I don't think it's a lemon yellow. I didn't take a screenshot, so I'm not looking at it, but I don't think it was a lemony yellow. I think it was a bit brighter than that. And it just looked gorgeous on screen. Absolutely loved it. Alan is then ranting about how he didn't need to get a guy, and then Evelyn leaves, and before we know it, Alan is on the floor, and he pees. He's desperate. What else can he do in that situation? We then cut back to Charlie and Jake, and something, I don't know if I've ever mentioned this before, but in general I find road trip films really, really boring. I just don't think a car is a fascinating setting for anything. It's just a personal preference. But for some reason, well, the quality of the writing, I guess, whenever we are in cars in 2.5 Men, I tend to like those scenes. I just think we get some of the best dialogue there, and this is certainly the case here. And Jake asks for ice cream and to go to the video store. Well, no, that's not correct. He just assumes that that's where they're going because that's what he wants. And Charlie says, no, you're not going to the video store. Jake points out that if he doesn't go to the video store, he won't have anything to do all weekend, and Charlie will have to entertain him. So they go to the video store, or the video game store, and Charlie meets a woman there, and here we have a quote from Jake. I think this is the only quote that I wrote down, and this is another, in my opinion, example to highlight that Jake is growing up a little bit. He says, and I quote, I don't want to have a play date with some stupid kid just so you can have sex with her. I feel like Jake of the previous season would be a bit oblivious, not necessarily unaware of what Charlie is trying to do, but I feel like he would just be tuned out to the adult world. In most cases, whenever the adults are having a conversation about sex or anything grown up, Jake is usually oblivious to it. He's in his own little bubble, but here we have an introduction, or a start of the introduction, to Jake being more aware of the more adult world around him, and also being quite free to talk about it like this. So I definitely think we are seeing something a little bit different here. We then go briefly back to Alan, who is trying to get the child-proof cap off of some painkillers. He falls again, and on that occasion I burst out loud laughing, because I feel like the first fall was maybe a little bit predictable. I could kind of see it coming, and the second one I didn't. And just the noise and the thunk and Alan's scream, well, it wasn't really a scream, it was more of a whimper, I just found it very funny. And then Charlie is trying to take Jake back to Judith. Judith's not in, so he ends up going home with him, and by the end of the episode, Alan and Charlie are both in desperate need of pain relief. Alan from the injury, Charlie from spending time with Jake. And there we end the episode. It does feel a little flat. The ending did seem to just fizzle out rather than have any kind of funny conclusion or anything. It did just feel a little bit weak. Not tremendously. It doesn't affect my overall enjoyment or anything, but I did feel like there should have been a little bit more, or something a little bit more entertaining. But that is definitely personal preference. But that aside, as I said, I think that it's a really strong start to the third season. I do remember bits of season 3, but there are certainly episodes that I don't remember. I didn't remember this episode in any great detail. I could certainly recall the basic concept, but there was a lot in this that I'd forgotten about. So I'm hoping that's the case with the rest of the season, and I can enjoy it really for the first time in probably over a decade. Looking forward to it. Weekend in Bangkok with 2 Olympic gymnasts is definitely a really good start.